Yet you talk about, I know we talked about this last time, but you talk about how the course supervisor's entire life is that course room.
Pretty much.
Yet he's still getting shit on for not getting people in.
Oh yeah, but the mechanism that L. Ron Hubbard devised for course room supervisors to control the population of their classrooms is to run a standard course room. And if you're and this is one of the most magical thinking places in a Scientology organization. I've never called it that before, but that is actually absolutely what it is. And I did my oh man, did I run around the pole on this one like 1,000 times as a course supervisor. If your course room is empty, if there are not, there's two students in there and you got room for 20, right? That's a pretty empty looking room and it's embarrassing.
Mm.
And you're supposed to have a packed course room all the time. They're supposed to be, practically standing room only is the sign of a good course room. Well, that is and the metric that's judged by is the standardness of the supervisor. If it's good, it fills up. If the supervisor is doing a shit job, violating policy, telling the students what to think, not enforcing misunderstood words, not getting them to do their demos. The clay demos are like tiny when they're supposed to be big. All these individual points of absolute minutia, absolutely useless factoids of how to run a Scientology classroom standardly. This is all sort of ritualistic in a way. Now that I actually think about this, I was just doing this whole thing on the occult, and magic, the last 2 weeks on my show. So I'm kind of in that mode of thinking, and this is a bit ritualistic because there's literally a checklist called the What is a Course checklist. It's based off the policy called What is a Course, and Hubbard lays out paragraph by paragraph all the different things that make up a standard Scientology course room: materials, supervisor, word clear, dictionaries in use, et cetera, et cetera. You have a checklist and you go and do an inspection of your course room against this checklist, or somebody comes in and does it on you. Mm-hmm. Or to you, like the ethics officer, the flag rep, the qualsec. I mean, there's different reasons people will come in and get up your, pipe about the standardness of your course room. But that's the magical ritual to get the statistics up in the classroom, regardless of what the reg is doing or what the Division 6 public guys are doing to bring new people in. None of that is your concern as a course room supervisor. You run a standard course room, your course room will be full. Period. And that's how I lived and died as a course room supervisor for years. It was all on me. And that didn't mean that I was supposed to go out and reg people or sell courses. That's not how that is interpreted. It's interpreted that you're a shit supervisor and you need correction and you need to run your course room standardly. And it needs to be tough and it needs to be rough and it needs to be hard and you need to be getting people through their courses. That's what it means.
So you mentioned being a standard course supervisor, and supposedly if you are standard, the room will fill up. It almost
Correct.
is reminding me of, it's making me think of a context where like Scientologists are giving word of mouth about the quality of your course room.
That's exactly what it's supposed to reflect. Exactly. Same with the Division 6 course room, the new public course room, right? Same drill. They're not as hard on the students as they are up in the area where I was. The Pro Academy course room is what it's called, the Academy. The new students, the guys who just sign up for their first or second courses, they're doing it down in the public division course room. And but the same standards apply for the supervisors. They're just kind of treating people with a little bit more kid gloves. But it's still, the standard tech of the course room is what fills the place up through good word of mouth and happy students re-signing onto their next course. They don't finish their course and leave. Mm-hmm. They immediately sign up for their next one, right? So you have the theory being you have this ever expanding kind of thing. And it's, it works just as well as the theory of multi-level marketing works. You know what I mean? It's like, no, it'll work. It's look, it's explained so beautifully here, and it's like, yeah, okay.
You got any stories as a course soup regarding your stats or no?
Nah, I mean,
Anything memorable?
nah, not really. I mean, nothing stands out in terms of like, oh wow, this is really going to impress people. It was a lot of grind. I mean, that's what being a staff member is. It's a lot of grind and a lot of useless attention and stress and anxiety over these kinds of points. I'm standing there, more anxious about, whether I've got the right dictionaries in my closet, in my dictionary closet in the course room, than I am, in the students in front of me. But then I, work really, really hard to get the students moving, but then you're interfering with them. You can get in their way, right? In an effort to try to make it standard and make sure they're doing well and check in with them, every fucking 10 minutes. And after a while, they're like, will you leave me alone? And you're supposed to go and give students spot checks and meter checks and do all these things as a supervisor, to the point where we checklisted all of that out, so that if you didn't give every student a spot check or a meter check every course period, you were off the rails. It became this very rote activity. It wasn't a dynamic working with the students kind of thing. Although we knew as the supervisors that that's what it should be and what it really at its heart was. If you wanted students to get through courses, you had to teach them, and you learned how to do that. And Hubbard's stuff is sort of a framework for that, but it doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work well, and it doesn't always do the job you need it to do. So you figure out all the ways you need to get around it or sidestep it. You know where all the articles are in the encyclopedia set to clarify all the different things Hubbard refers to in the different lectures your students are going to listen to. He's going to talk about butterfly lighting. He's going to talk about that, right? And you're going to be like, what the fuck is butterfly lighting? You're going to have a tab in the encyclopedia ready for that, because you don't want this guy sitting in a dictionary all day buried in photography terms. You don't want that. Mm-hmm. So you have the exact right place where this guy needs to see, oh, here it is. Here's a picture. Boom, we're done. And he doesn't spend 5 hours learning how to be a National Geographic photographer, right?
Yeah.
So this kind of thing is what I mean. You learn all this stuff. And funny, that some tools came out through the golden age of tech stuff that actually would make a supervisor's job easier with some of this stuff, like the student hat glossary, for example, right? We didn't have that back when I was a supervisor. And so we had to have those encyclopedias and reference books and everything kind of all ready. Or we would know to the fucking paragraph where certain obscure references were. And a certain question would come up about floating needles, or about doing assessments on the e-meter and special terminology that your notations that you use when you're doing assessments. I don't want to get all technical, but there's different things you write down when you're using an e-meter. Mm-hmm. You're not just making notes of what the person says, you're noting down what the e-meter is doing.
Yeah, you're noting down like the tone arm and all that.
Yeah, tone arm, the time, the reads on the e-meter, and there's like 26 of them, that you could, different ones. So you got to know how to write all this stuff down and do it pretty much without even looking at the paper. And after a while, you kind of acquire that skill. But there were certain obscure references connected with this activity that would be buried in some 1969 bulletin that nobody ever looks at. It's not on any course check sheet, but it exists. It's a bulletin Hubbard wrote. So you know about that bulletin, and to send people, okay, Tech Volume 5, page 369, paragraph 3. Just go read it and you'll understand this, right? And they go, oh, okay, and off they go. And I would have about 20 or 30 of those in my, in my hip pocket as a course supervisor to just deal with student questions and stuff that would come up. It wasn't always just find your word. Mm-hmm. We weren't that stupid about it.
That's originally how I interpreted it.
Senior people, executive people who didn't really know the actuality of teaching people Scientology, because it is kind of a skill. You, they only know what the policy says or what the bulletins say. And this is, again, the difference between what it says versus the real world of it. So they'll come in with these checklists and these rote ideas that you have to have. Every student gets spot checked. There's a policy letter. It's called spot checks. It tells the supervisor how to do a spot check on a student. But it doesn't say in there that every single student is supposed to be spot checked every single class period. It doesn't say that, but they enforce it. So you're not running a standard course room if every student isn't spot checked. And you're interfering with people just trying to get through their courses by stopping them when they're doing fine. And that is a violation of policy. So here's an order from your senior telling you to do something that you know is wrong, but he's your senior and he's going to give you all kinds of shit if you don't do it. And yet here's this policy from Hubbard saying, don't do that. So this is a very stupid example, I'm sure, but one that sort of demonstrates the sort of like ping-ponging that you have to do as a Scientology staff member all the time.
So sometimes by being standard, you're sabotaging yourself.
Yeah, and vice versa. Absolutely. Yeah. It's especially when it came to the technical stuff, right? Because you got to be trained. You got to do all this special classwork and training just to do the job of being a supervisor or being a word clearer.
I'd be like, so if say, because every student's working on their own course, what kind of training did you need on each student's materials in order to properly guide them to correct things?
See, that's the whole point, is you don't get any of that. L. Ron Hubbard is crystal clear in a policy letter called What is a Course High Crime? Okay, there's a policy letter called What is a Course? Mm-hmm. As I described, it lays out all the things that need to be in the course room: tables, chairs, dolls for the students to work with and their drilling, a supervisor, a word clearer, like all this stuff. I mean, at one point I practically had that fucking thing memorized. Then there's this other policy letter called What is a Course High Crime, where it specifically says if you're fucking around with this list of what is a course and you're offering classwork in Scientology organizations and you're not complying with that policy letter, you're committing a high crime. And if the course room supervisor thinks his job is to explain the materials to the student and not use study tech and only study tech, he is committing a high crime, or she is committing a high crime. Period, end of story. And it's listed in the high crimes. If you look it up in the ethics book, supervisors not following or demanding or enforcing what is a course. The policy letter. So, or WIAC, W-I-A-C, right? WIAC. The WIAC. Oh my God, man. My whole world revolved around WIAC for a very, very long time. At the supervisor level and then at the management level. So I've seen every in and out of this thing you can have. And so the reality, looking back on the whole silly and the goofiness of it, is that the supervisors are trained in study tech. You are trained within an inch of your life on misunderstood words, all the phenomena, all the different ways words can be misunderstood. There's 10 different ways. All the different variations of misunderstood words and the effect it has on someone. Because there's all this physiological stuff that Hubbard says, like you've fallen asleep in the classroom or you can't remember what you just read. Well, that indicates a misunderstood word. Period, end of story. There's no argument about it. We're going to find your MU. So this kind of stuff is what you're trained on, but it's more the interning or the real world. It's like medical school, and then there's the interning where you hit the emergency room. Mm-hmm. And then things get real. And that's what happens when you hit the floor as a course room supervisor. That's what we called it, right? You're on the floor of the course room, right? And you're supervising. Yeah. And here comes a student, and he's got a question, or she has a concern, or some kind of disagreement. And now it's time to figure out what's actually going on in front of you. Is it a misunderstood word? You also have other tech that it could be. There's false data. There's crashing misunderstood words. There's there's misunderstood words, but then there's also skipped gradients, and then there's also lack of mass. You're given these three things, not just the misunderstood word thing. And you're supposed to sort of triage this right there on the spot with the student, figure out what's going on, because they're not going to always know what's going on, and solve it, work it with them, and get it figured out. And so this is what you kind of come to learn, is you not only learn the methodology, but because you're so used to this body of students who tend to be, the people who keep coming around, you just kind of learn them, mm-hmm. And you learn what they need to learn. And Hubbard's not always easy to learn. Hubbard has some obscure shit, and his writing sucks. But we didn't think about it that way when we were in. We thought we were the stupid idiots who just couldn't understand his greatness, right? So it's a whole different script when you're in. You're not thinking about his writing or his talking as a bunch of gobbledygook and nonsense. You're thinking it's, pearls of wisdom, right?
Workable.
So anyway, I'm going on and on and on about this. But
you're good.